Good morning, students. Let's start a journey with me. Today, I shall start a short story, Debate. It was first published in 1889, and this short story was written by Anton Chekov. Anton Chekov is one of the most respected short story writers. He was born in 1860 in southern Russia. He won Pushkin Prize at the age of 28. He contracted tuberculosis at a young age. At the time of his death, he had authored 16 plays, one novel, 5 novellas, countless letters, and over 200 short stories. He died on 15 July 1904. He was a physician by profession. He said about his profession, medicine is my lawful wife, and literature is my mistress. Now let's move towards this short story. You will see the flashback scene in the very beginning part of the story. This story is about a debate between a banker and a lawyer. It was an autumn night. Autumn is the name of season like summer, winter, monsoon. The yellow leaves of the tree fall on the ground in this season. So, it was a dark autumn night. The first character of this story is an old banker, and he was in his house. He was worried, he was restless, he was in tension. Now, you may have a question, what a short story this is when the character is restless in the very beginning part of it. Actually, the banker had given a party 15 years before. It was to an autumn evening 15 years before. He invited many clever men in the party. So the banker was the host of the party, and he invited many journalists, intellectual men in the party. And you know it very well. If the intellectual people met together anywhere, you can imagine on what type of topics they would discuss. They would discuss on social topic, political, economical issues. Here in this story, the discussion arose on a very interesting topic, and that is capital punishment. It means if any person committed a crime in his life, what punishment should be given to him? Either should he be given a lifelong imprisonment or death penalty. The journalist and the other clever men were against the death penalty. They considered it immoral. According to them, the death penalty is not suitable for Christian states. The banker, who was the host of the party, was at the side of death penalty. He said, death penalty is more moral and humane than the imprisonment of life. He stated, capital punishment means death penalty kills a man at once, but a lifelong imprisonment kills him slowly. One of the guests observed that both were immoral because both have same object, to take away the life. And any state, any country is not a god. How can it take away the life of a person if it cannot return? The country hasn't any right of it. Now, here we shall meet the most important character of the story. He was a young lawyer. He was 25 years old. He was quiet. When he was asked his opinion about the question, he said, the death penalty and the life sentence both are equally immoral. Then he said, if I had to choose any one between them, I would certainly choose the lifelong imprisonment. He added a very good point for the supportation of his decision. He said, to live anyhow is better than not at all. Because, see, if a person got death penalty, his life stopped there. He stopped to breathe, to feel, to think, to see this life. So it's better to get lifelong imprisonment. At least he will live the life. And with this, a lively discussion arose. The banker, who was the host of the party, he was very nervous in those days. He became excited and struck the table with his fist. He shouted at the lawyer. And what he shouted? I shall bet you 2 millions you wouldn't stay in a solitary confinement for 5 years. means he would not stay in a loneliness. If one got lifelong imprisonment, it means he would have to live all alone in a prison. No light remain in his life. It fills with darkness. The lawyer said, if it's a bait, then I would stay not 5 but 15 years. And the banker cried, 15! Done! He was ready to stake 2 millions, and the lawyer was too ready to stake his freedom. Thus, a meaningless bet was carried out. That time, the banker was very happy with the bet, and then all the guests went for the dinner. The On the time of the dinner, the banker said to the lawyer, "You are a young man. Think better of the bet, because that time 2 million was a small amount for the banker, but the lawyer will lost the best years of his life." Actually, the banker was mocking at the lawyer, and he said, "You will be unable to live in a solitary confinement more than 3 to 4 years, or unable to stay longer." So, this one is the flashback part of the story. Now, the banker is no longer young, he is an old banker. He remembered all those things, the party, the lawyer, the senseless bet of 15 years. He remembered everything and asked himself, what was the object of that bet? The man lost 15 years of his life, and I shall lose my 2 millions. But what will it prove? What is the good out of it? 15 years before, the banker was a pampered man, and the lawyer had a simple greed of money. Again, the banker remembered what followed that evening. Now, again, the story goes in flashback. A lodge in banker's garden was chosen for the prisoner. Now, the lawyer will live his 15 years like a prisoner in a prison or in the lodge. Now, there were some rules of this bet for the prisoner. The lawyer should not be free to cross the threshold of the lodge. He was not allowed to see the human beings, to hear the human voice. He wasn't allowed to receive letters and newspapers. Those are the things which he was not allowed to do. Now, what are the things that were allowed to him? He was allowed to have musical instrument, books, wine, cigarette, and letters. He could write the letters but couldn't receive them. He can drink wine, can smoke cigarette. His only relation with the world was a little window, and with this the debate began. It began from 12 o'clock, November 14, 1870, and it will end at 12 o'clock on November 14, 1885. In the first year of his imprisonment, the lawyer suffered severely from loneliness and depression. He refused wine and tobacco, but the sound of piano could be heard continuously day and night from the lodge. He read literature that were novels and short stories with light characters and complicated plot. In the second year, he stopped playing piano. He read classics. Now, what happened in the fifth year? The music was audible again in the fifth year. He started drinking, eating, sleeping, and doing nothing. He was yawning and angrily talking to himself. He didn't read anything in the fifth year, but he used to write. And whatever he would write, he teared up all in the morning. He too cried in the fifth year. In the second half of the sixth year, he began to study history, philosophy, and languages. He eagerly studied all those things. He asked for some 600 volumes in 4 years. He wrote a letter to banker in 6 different languages and asked him to show the letter to those who know the language well. If no mistake were found, then fire a shot in the garden. The banker showed it to the language experts and finally fired a gun in the garden. At 10th year, the prisoner read gospel, theology, and histories. In the last 2 years, he read natural sciences, Byron, Shakespeare, medical text, chemistry, philosophy, theology. Now the banker remembered all these things, whatever happened within this 15 years. According to the B.A.I, the lawyer passed his 15 years in the lodge as a prisoner. The banker thought tomorrow he will get his freedom. By the agreement, I ought to pay him 2 millions. Now his condition became worse. He was unable to give him anything. He was no more rich and wealthy now. He wanted to save the money what he had left to him. For this, a thought came in his mind. Why didn't the man die? The banker thought, after taking my money, the lawyer will enjoy his life happily, and I shall look at him angrily like a beggar. Therefore, he decided to kill the lawyer. It was the autumn night of 1885. It was dark and cold in the garden. The rain was falling. It was the time of 3 o'clock. Everyone was asleep in the house. He went towards the garden. He stood in the lodge and called watchman 2 times, but no response. He thought, if my intention fulfilled, the first suspicion would fall upon the watchman. He lighted a match, but it went out then. He peeped through the little window of prisoner's room. A candle was burning in his room. He was sitting at the table. The banker could see his back, his hair on his head, and his hands. Open books were laying on the table. 5 minutes passed, but the prisoner gave no response. The banker tapped the window. The prisoner made no movement. The banker put the key in the keyhole and broke the seals of the door. Means he unlocked the door which was closed for 15 years. And the door creaked with a sound. The lawyer looked at a skeleton with shaggy beard and long curls like a woman. The banker thought the lawyer was a half dead man. He only had to throw him on the bed and stifle him with the pillow. Even an clever expert would unable to find any sign of a violent death. But as I told earlier, there were open books on the table, and the lawyer was asleep. In front of his bowed head on the table, there was a sheet of paper. The banker took the letter in his hand and started to read. It was the letter written to the banker by the prisoner. And now let's see what the prisoner wrote in the letter. He wrote that he will gain his freedom tomorrow at 12 o'clock. He told that he despised freedom, life, death, book, and the 2 millions too. He studied earthly life for 15 years. He experienced the life, the nature, the movements of human beings and their activities through books. He earned wisdom. He said, I despise wisdom and blessings of the world. He knew the reality of life. He found the nothinglessness of everything. Therefore, he said, I renounce your 2 million of which I once dreamed of a paradise. To deprive myself of the right of the money, I shall go out from here 5 hours before the time fixed. The banker read everything, became helpless. His eyes filled with tears, felt very shameful, and went back to home. The watchman came next morning and told him that the prisoner went away from the lodge. He climbed out of the window into the garden, go to the gate, and then disappeared. The banker went in the lodge and made it sure. Finally, he put the letter in the fireproof safe to avoid unnecessary talk. With this story ends, and here we learn about a simple bait but has given the real meaning of life. It's about the nature and value of life. Thank you.